Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock Blog, and I'm here with Dion for another episode of Wuxia Weekend. And tonight we're going to be talking about Killer Constable, a 1980 film directed by Kuei Chih-Hung about a heist of the Royal Treasury where this really determined and somewhat murderous constable is assigned to the task of hunting down the robbers and bringing them to justice. And the plot gets a little bit complicated when one of the robbers, we learn, is basically doing it to protect his blind daughter, and there's a lot of moral questions and ambiguity in this film, and I think that's largely what we're going to talk about tonight. So Dion, how would you describe this movie? Because it is a little bit unusual.
It's definitely not your typical chasing down thieves in the King Dynasty, but it's more of a character study of people and their humanity and why they do things. Like you said, the one character is doing it because he's a robber because he's trying to protect his blind daughter who he's raising all alone out in the middle of nowhere. The constable is just killing everybody, and you're not exactly sure why he's doing it, if he's liking it or if it's just he believes it's his duty, but I believe there's something else more than that. Deep in there, and then the person who actually commits the heist that we find out later is just greedy. So it's a character study of really three men on this treacherous journey and walking a fine line of all that they have to do, I guess. And
I guess so. We should probably, again, this is available on Prime, so I'd encourage people to go onto Prime and watch the movie. It's a really great film. Like I think I want to talk about some of the questions you raised, but before we get into that, I just want to emphasize this is a Kuei Chih-Hung film who did movies like Killer Snakes and Boxer's Omen and Hex, and he's one of my favorite directors. And one of the things that really struck me about the movie was how good he was at creating atmosphere with color and sound, and just he just makes really good movies. They look good, they feel good, and they generally follow a fairly clear vision, I find. You know what I mean? And he has quite a range, actually. Like, this is very different from a film like Killer Snakes. So just before we get into sort of the questions of morality and messaging, what did you think of the overall filmmaking here?
I thought it was a really well-made film. You know how I am about emotion, and this film made me emotional the first time I saw it. The end, to me, was very striking and very sad and brought tears to my eyes. Not an ugly cry, but I did cry. Like you said, the lighting was very striking in some points. Some of the scenes are dark, which to me connotates the heaviness of the film. And then it goes from light to dark. And I mean, there's never anything funny in this movie. So there are never any hints of humor. So you know it's a serious movie. Yeah. And to me, that was fine. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. And after watching it, it just kind of made me think about some things that we'll get into later. Yeah,
Kuei Chih-Hung is very good at getting you to feel and to think. Like, and a lot of times in some of his other movies, the feeling might be more of a disgust or an unease. And in this movie, it's it's more in the realm of suspense and concern and just the sense of danger that sort of hangs over everything. But there's and I think also one of the things that it does that's really great is it does a good job of really sort of setting up all of the different characters that you have to sort of think about and worry about throughout the movie. So you have the Chen Quan-tai character, the Killer Constable guy, but you also have his subordinates who are all pretty important. Like there's the guy who is basically on the verge of retirement, right? Who wants to go on one last, wants to go on one big venture with him, right? And so he basically is begging him to let him go, and he reluctantly allows him, which spoilers, if you haven't seen it, please watch it first. But he it doesn't turn out well for him in the end, though. It's a little bit ambiguous, like you were saying about things before. Like it's a bittersweet ending for that character, and similar for some of the other guys that go along with him. And so, and the same thing with the Gu Feng character, the bandit leader who has the blind daughter. The movie kind of pivots on that moment, right?
Yes.
Where you realize like, oh, this bandit is caring for his daughter, and it doesn't do the. I mean, it does make him sympathetic, but it doesn't make the whole movie about him being super sympathetic. You're still in the point of view of the killer constable, and that kind of matters for how things play out. And also, the blind daughter herself, and even the villainous official, at the end. There's, you get a real sense of character throughout the movie. Even guys like I forget the character's name, but there's a Jason Pipiao character. I think his name on the Hong Kong movie database, it's
Fang something.
Yeah, Fan Jin Peng or something. Even he sort of stands out. Do you know what I mean? He has like he's very memorable, and the wife and the husband early on that they interact with, the
Yes.
wife that gets punched and then the husband gets killed, and the wife is played by the marvelous Teresa Ha Ping, who I think does a pretty good job here as well. But all these characters they really are memorable and they stand out. But yeah, so I don't know. Getting into the moral questions you raised. My first question is the killer constable a good guy?
Yeah, that was gonna be my first talking point. I don't like him at the beginning of the movie because I think the one character said it the best when he said that you kill, and therefore, well, I'm paraphrasing, that you're a murderous constable, you're not killing, you're killing mercilessly.
Yeah.
So he's just a murderous constable, and he must enjoy the name Killer Constable. But then another character also said something that stuck with me, was that he doesn't lack humanity. It's his humanity is buried deep inside because of the job that he has to have. He has to take care of all these men, bring them back home to their families. So, he has to deal with that. And he just doesn't take prisoners because it's safer that way. When you take someone or capture them and have to bring them back, then all that just leads to more bloodshed. It's better to kill them instead of drag them back. But yeah, he's really not a likable character. I would not call him a hero in any aspects of the word. He's a man doing his job who believes that his job is killing the bad guy, and that's it to me. He's not any kind of hero.
No, and even when they describe his humanity, I think the phrasing the guy used was his humanity is like a sword buried deep inside the sheath or something. Like it was that's it. It was like a menace. It was kind of menacing the way he described it. But yeah, I don't think he is a good guy. I think he's the bad guy. I think number one, he's a Manchu, right? And in these movies, the Manchus are generally the bad guys, right? And it's almost like the movie doesn't acknowledge that until the scene where he's in that house with the Ku Feng character, and he says, the reason when he asks why are you doing this, he says, because of you Manchus have made us do it, right? And so you Manchurians have made us do it. So I feel like what the movie is doing is it's putting us in the point of view of the corrupt official. Do you know what I mean? Because even though this guy isn't as corrupt as the guy at the end of the movie, he's not bad like that guy. He's still a lackey. Do you know what I mean? He's still somebody who's been following orders and has been ruthlessly killing, people that are, it seems by the end of the movie, resorting to banditry because they have to, because that's the circumstances that have been created by the Manchurian government, right? So I feel like what the movie is we're watching a bad guy become a good guy by the end of the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's a bad guy on a path to redemption, but we never get to see the redemption fulfilled.
Yeah, and that's the question I have. So, because at the end of in that scene in the house, he's surrounded by men who he thinks are the bandit leader's men, but it turns out it's actually the official that's tasked him with this originally,
right?
And that's when he realizes, oh, he's been betrayed, and that it's all just, you know. It's all because this official wanted to pocket all the money, so he's killing all of the. He specifically had this guy go out because he knew this guy would kill all of the
everybody,
people.
Not bring them back.
Yeah,
and he was also hoping that the killer constable would be killed, so there'd be no evidence left over of any of his wrongdoing. He's
a little bit like the Robert De Niro character in Goodfellas, who like goes around whacking all the people so he can keep all the money from the big heist. You know, it's a little bit like that. And
another thing too is, remember that the killer constable collects all the money from each one of the bandits that he kills. So not only does he get to keep the large share that he was keeping, but the ultimate bad guy would have been able to collect everybody else's shares because he was bringing them back.
Yeah, exactly. And so, what I'm wondering about though is, in that scene, that's when everything kind of really changes for the main character, where I think he goes from becoming a bad guy, or at least a member of this corrupted hierarchy that is, you know, pursuing good guys in the movie, and he realizes the Gu Feng character isn't that bad, that he's this is, you know, just a product of the situation that everybody is in. And it's a really clever scene. Gu Feng, the bandit leader, he says, look, this is my hideout where I always hide from the constables. There's an air vent. They only think one person is in here, so I'll let me die. They'll think it's you, and you can escape, and all I'm asking you to do is to protect my daughter. And so the next thing that happens is the killer constable shows up in town to kill the corrupt official who sent him off in the first place, really in like what looks like a really anger-filled revenge scene. And again, there's a lot of spoilers here, but he attacks him in the streets. The fight goes all the way back into the official's courtroom, and it's a really well done scene. Like, I really like the way that you're feeling the frustration of the killer constable every time he's trying to hit this official, and one of the men leaps forward and blocks the attack. It's very interesting to me that the thing that's always thwarting him are loyal henchmen. Do you know what I mean? Just like I know that's always the case in these movies, but it just seemed to be particularly the case here. And I find it interesting because up until this point in the film, that's essentially what the killer constable was. You know, do you know what I mean? And so he's, you know, but eventually he wears down all the men. He kills all the men, and he's able to stab the official. But the official presses a button on the throne, and a bunch of spears, or I don't know what they are. They're like
some kind of arrow spikes come from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And one unfortunately stabs the killer constable in the head.
Yeah. And it's not a clean death scene. It's not like in a lot of movies where they want to sort of pull at your heartstrings and kill the hero, he gets stabbed in the belly or something that just feels good dramatically. But this was like right through the top of the head. It's like the hardest part of the body that you know what I mean? Like it almost hurts to watch. And it just, I don't know, something about it's I feel like the director is deliberately doing that to get a reaction out of the viewer. Do you know what I mean? Like, he wants you to feel unsatisfied with that death.
Yes,
because go ahead.
Well, for me, the unsatisfaction was that his redemption wasn't complete. To me, the completion would have been if he had been allowed to walk out of that chamber and go and take care of the daughter of the bandit like he had asked.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get to do that, and the poor girl is left all alone, blind, and how is she going to take care of herself? So, you know, the redemption to me is never really completely fulfilled, which made me angry.
because we see her in the rain in that last scene, and
that makes me cry.
Yeah, and you really have a lot of sympathy for her by this point in the movie because she's such a nice character. She helped nurse the killer constable back to health. There's this great scene where the killer constable takes the bandit's horse from a battle, and he ends up back at the bandit's house, and the daughter thinks it's the father at first because there are bells on the horse to alert her, and when she realizes it's this other guy, she brings him inside and helps him, and then the father returns, and because she's blind, she can't see that they both have swords, that they both want to kill each other, and the way that they talk as if they're old friends, but there's this looming sort of, weird...
You feel the tension in the room.
Yeah, it's a really great scene. But because of all that, you really feel for her by that final scene. And I guess what I'm wondering is, on the one hand, I see that final scene, I'm like, well, it's karma. He sort of had to die to be redeemed. But then, like you say, he doesn't actually end up helping the daughter, which is what he... I don't know if he ever actually said he would do it, but it was at least implied that he would by going into that shaft. And so... so did he by going after this corrupt official in the end, was he just further committing down the path of evil? Or I don't know if evil's the right word, because this movie exists in a very gray morality, but was he going further down that dark path and satisfying himself, or was he, do you know what I mean? Because he's neglecting the woman that he's supposed to be protecting by doing that.
But I also think that as the constable, his ultimate charge is justice, and justice would not have been done if this evil or corrupt official had been allowed to get away with stealing the money. There probably was a better way to get around it, but because he's the killer constable, all he can see is in one straight line. I have to end him in order for it all to end.
I would agree for you. Or sorry, not for you. I'd agree with you, except for the fact that at the beginning of the movie, we got that extended sequence with the Empress Dowager, right? And we see how comfortable she is living, and how corrupt the whole bureaucracy is. Do you know what I mean? Just like I feel like this is a movie where there's two worlds, the world of the Manchurians and the world of like the Han Chinese, right? And that woman exists inside the world of the Han Chinese. And when that robber tasks him with helping the daughter, he's kind of inviting him into that world. Do you know what I mean? And instead he continues in this world of the corrupt Manchurian government where, sure, he kills this guy, but what's going to happen next? It's not, he kills him, he dies, and now, obviously, just another corrupt official is going to fill his place, right? There's nothing is going to change as a result.
Well, the gold would, I think...
The gold was returned, yeah, but who gets the gold? The Empress Dowager, who was enjoying her lobster and, at the start of the movie, like...
And I agree with you, but being
okay.
that his job is a constable and he's to uphold the law, I'm using air quotes here, and he is a man of what he believes to be integrity, and he's got this one line of vision. That's what his job is.
Okay.
Is to fulfill the justice by reclaiming the gold for the Emperor Dowager, who is his ultimate boss, and taking care of the corrupt official. Yes, another one would have been put in place, but if he had returned the gold to her, he might have been able to retire and then go on to help the daughter and then leave the world of the Manchus and enter into the world of the Han. He might have been rewarded substantially for returning the gold and would have allowed him to take better care of this daughter. But we never get to know because he dies.
Yes.
So I just think that there are so many what ifs that are left at the end. And I think, I don't know, I wouldn't have liked the movie better, but another option would have been if he had escaped through the vent and just taken the daughter and moved on with his life and just left that whole world behind in the first place. Yeah,
that's kind of the ending that you want, but I guess it is the less dramatically, interesting ending, right? Like that's the ending that I wanted too. Yeah. No, but what's so interesting about this movie is I feel like what you're saying and what I'm saying are both very plausible. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very, different people will watch this movie and some of them will agree with you, some of them will agree with me, some of them will probably have completely different reactions. He's really good at just not like you get enough to feel like the director is giving you some kind of, like, he has some kind of conclusion in his mind.
Right.
But everything is plausible enough that it really could kind of go in any number of directions. And that's why I say this really feels like a morally gray universe that the characters are inhabiting. And it's not just when you first watch the movie, you feel like, ooh, it's kind of like an exploitative, he's a badass killer constable, like sort of like a Dirty Harry type character or something. But the more you watch it, the more you realize there's like deep layers to this movie, because it's rewarding the more and more I see it. I have more and more questions, and I say, oh, the last time I was thinking this, but this time I'm starting to think this other way about the movie. Do you know what I mean? I'm starting to reevaluate it. So I think it's one of the, I don't know, it's kind of unique in that way. There's not this is a movie that I find myself constantly going back to in my head thinking about, just because I'm like, well, what was the right answer to what the guy was doing at that moment? Like, what was, oh, go ahead.
Well, I think the director's intention is not to have a right answer, because the world really doesn't have a right answer. The world is morally gray, and therefore his movie was morally gray. I just think that I'm like you. Every time I watch it, I get a different thought in my head, and I go on a completely different tangent with what my what ifs would have been. But there is no right and wrong in this. Just like there was no hero and villain. Everybody was in their own way. Well, I was going to say that maybe some of his constable underlings were more of the innocent variety than not necessarily heroes, but definitely more of the innocent type. But
well, there was one guy, like you said, who was saying, I don't believe in killing innocent people, but then we do see what happens to him.
Right.
He really gets it. Not from the Killer Constable. Killer Constable, spoilers again, performs a mercy killing on him. But and then the other guy, the older one, who I think is also one of the more likable members of the group, he gets poisoned by the Jason Pipiao character. So, which that scene is probably one of the best duels in wuxia film history. That is a classic wuxia, standoff scene. And I love how it starts in that little inn that's. And you know what? That scene also is a strong indicator of the morality I was talking about before, because remember, they go into that inn, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but they go into that inn, and he asks them, in all these movies they say, give us wine and beef or whatever, right? And they always bring out these dishes that make you hungry when you see them. And in this inn, he's like, oh no, we don't have any beef. It's terrible in this world now. There's no money. There's no, where are we going to get beef?
The world's in chaos. Where are we going to find beef and wine?
Thank you. Yeah. So what do they have? They have toasted bread. Like, that's the last thing you want in a wuxia inn is toasted bread, right? You want these, terrific noodle dishes with beef, or you want steamed buns with minced beef in them, or you want these very savory looking meals. And so I feel like the Jason Pipiao character had this knowing look on his face the whole time, and maybe that knowing look had to do with the fact that he knew that the constable was on the wrong side of good in the situation. Do you know what I mean?
Possibly.
But again, side point, so I'm sorry, what brought us to that point? Because I know I went on a tangent. I want to return to what you were saying.
Oh, that the movie was morally gray because the world is morally gray, and there really isn't a right or wrong answer to any of our questions. And based on our experiences, I think too, we also bring that in when we're watching movies. So we're all going to look at it differently.
Yeah, that definitely goes without saying. And I do think it's one of these movies where, he this director, I think he does a very good job of taking characters that normally wouldn't be the protagonist, that would maybe normally be an antagonist of some kind, and turning them into the protagonist. You know what I mean? Like in the movie The Killer Snakes, that character is really unlikable when you break it down and think about it. He has sympathetic elements, but he does a lot of horrible things. And what he's good at is doing these character studies where it's like, okay, this character is fairly imperfect, but we're going to focus on him and we're going to learn more about him. And that's not something that you I feel like you don't get a lot of that in Wuxia. Wuxia tends to have more stark contrasts in in the way characters operate, and so he's very good at committing to focusing on the non-protagonist character and getting a lot out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like even think of the movie Hex, right? That movie Hex. Was anybody likable in that film?
I didn't watch it.
I thought you were in on the Hex one that we did.
No, I didn't. I did Black Magic with you guys. I didn't. I refused to do Hex.
Okay, all right. Well, if you had seen Hex, none of the characters are particularly likable. They're interesting but not likable, and so and even characters that at first appear sympathetic and likable are totally not likable once you learn more about them, right? So I don't know. It's I would say this is kind of a character study. I think this movie
definitely. Even the constables posse, I guess you would call them. They're very interesting. I like when they set out on their journey and they're joking about the one guy's wife, about how she made the boots for him to keep his feet warm so he didn't get sick. Isn't he the one who ends up poisoned? Yeah, that is the one. And then they were talking about, well, did she make you a pee bottle?
Yeah. And then he had a response which was like, "Oh, I'm not like you. I'm not like you, and still wetting the bed or something."
Yeah. And I thought that the people that the constable chose to go with him was very telling, because usually the constable would pick the most ferocious to go with him, but because someone had made that comment before he chose about his humanity, I think he deliberately chose people that necessarily wouldn't have gotten chosen to go with him.
So are you saying that
fiercer fighters in the ranks, but he chose the married one. He didn't want the groom to be to go, but the groom to be refused to stay behind.
Yeah.
Two relatively young ones, but I think that was a peek at his humanity. I'm not going to pick the most ferocious. I'm going to prove kind of that I can do it without the muscle and the meanness.
Is that are they then maybe reflections of his humanity? Like, does that mean like as those guys die that his humanity is
I don't think his humanity is dying as his posse dies. I think his humanity is growing.
Okay.
As his posse dies.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Becoming to a realization with each one, and I think it really started with having to do the mercy killing of the one that he, I guess, was the closest to. So it just comes out stronger and stronger, so that he's ready to meet the robber and end up in the vent eventually. I think all those things had to happen before. Otherwise, he just would have been on a tear the whole entire movie. But you could see peaks of his humanity coming out, because I think at one point he probably would have taken someone in and just captured them, but it was too late by then. He's killed everybody else. He might as well this one, and then you end up in the town. I think you're onto something there, because I feel like they definitely seem to represent something meaningful about his morality, and I think as they are killed,
it's almost like it transfers over to him. Do you know what I mean? It's like yeah, I think that feels right with what happens with the film. Yeah, just to get back to atmosphere too, there was one scene I want to point out because, I mean, there's the whole movie is atmospheric. He's and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but a lot of his films are kind of modeled after like giallo style horror, like the Italian horror movies, and but there's one scene where it's actually a beach setting, which, you know, I wouldn't normally think of as atmospheric. Like there's that scene where he goes to the fishing house and he kills the, you know, that scene. I grew up by the water, and I remember, you know, whenever we would go out and play, we'd always go to these areas where you'd have like the dried nets with like the fish guts in them and the lobster traps and all these things. And something about the way that scene was presented, where you had the sound of the waves, the sound of the wind that you also get from the water, all of the rocky environment and the sand, and the netting that's throughout everything. I've never felt as much like I'm in a beach scene in a film. Like there are tons of movies where they shoot on the beach, right? There's tons of movies that try to get the perfect beach shot and try to make you feel like you're at the beach. I've never felt like I've legitimately been at the beach like that shot. That's the closest I've ever seen in a film to what it's really like to be in a place like that. Do you know what I mean? In terms of feel, look, sound. And again, I mean, I don't know, maybe you didn't have that reaction to it, but like to me it was like a very deep, genuine reaction to the scene. Like this is definitely what it feels like to be in this kind of environment, because I grew up around this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? But
I didn't have that same reaction. I'm definitely not a water or beach person. But
well, I should say I'm not a water or beach person either, but I grew up by the beach. So
yeah,
I don't go in the water, Dion. I structure my whole life so I don't have to ever worry about being eaten by a shark. So
me too.
yeah. I think people that go into the water are idiots. I think they're just asking for problems. So, which hopefully that doesn't lose us a ton of listeners, because I'm willing to bet more than half of our listeners like going to the water. But I don't want to get eaten by sharks. So
me either.
But I'm sorry, go on. Go on.
Oh, I've lost my train of thought. But it reminded me of I can't remember the movie name. It's very iconic, and it's the Japanese versus the Chinese. But you know the movie. We've done it before. With what's his name?
I don't know. There's
Norman
a lot.
Norman Chu is the
Duel to the Death. Duel to the Death.
Yes.
Yeah.
That gave me that feel of that movie. Was what I was gonna say.
No, and that's. Oh, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
No, that's all I was gonna say was when they had the shooting at that beach scene reminded me of Duel to the Death. And how they shot that final scene of those two, and
that's a marvelous. That's a classic scene. That whole movie is just amazing. But something about that beach scene, that beach scene is trying to do something different. That beach scene is all about the danger that they're in for being up on that high rock by the water. Like the feeling that you get watching that scene is, oh my God, I hope nobody falls. Do you know what I mean? Like that's. But I feel like this scene, while the action in the scene was great, I love the action throughout the movie, it wasn't really the point. I feel like he was trying to make you feel like you were really in that house. Do you know what I mean? Like it was, I don't know, I just got a different vibe from the scene. But I agree with you. It definitely reminded me of that scene. Like that was definitely one of the scenes that popped into my head when that happened. And yeah, so I don't know, is there anything else in the movie that I'm overlooking that you wanted to talk about, or anything that we haven't discussed yet that we should?
Well, we haven't really talked about the fight scenes, but the fight scenes are really well done. I just think they're secondary to everything else that's going on, or to the character study of the Killer Constable. Yeah, because
when I think about it, I really like the fight scenes a lot. They're not... I feel like they're not all done in the traditional way. I feel like they're... Like, okay, the scene with the Jason Pipiao character, that's a really engaging and suspenseful scene. It's like a standoff that starts at the end And now I remember how we broke off from that tangent before. It starts in the inn, and then it works its way into that scene at nighttime in like like abandoned city or something, or abandoned temple. And he poisons the guy's number 2, the old man who had the boots. And then the Killer Constable chases him for the antidote, and the whole battle is kind of for the antidote, it seems. But this guy just has all these tricks up his sleeve, so the fight is all about the tricks he has. And then when he tries to sort of do the poison dart in the sleeve routine, the Killer Constable's so fast he's able to take his sheathed sword and slice him and still kind of evade the dart, so it just goes through the top of his shirt or something. But I don't know, that scene to me felt like it was fairly representative of how action is handled in the movie, where there's action and it's cool, but your eye is kind of on the conversation being had, or on like whatever the intentions of the hero are. Like in the final scene, all that hero wants to do is stab the bad official. You can feel it. Do you know what I mean? Like all the fighting is all just designed to make you want the hero to stab the bad guy. And so it's I feel like in a lot of these movies you want to see swords clash, and you want to see the twirling, and you want to see all of the action. But in this, the action itself is an impediment to what you want. Do you know what I mean? It's an impediment to seeing him stab that bad guy. Right. You know, so it's just different. I don't quite know how to describe it. It's not like I remember any particular moment the way I might in some other movies, but I do remember the feeling that it gave me. I do remember feeling like the timing was all really well done, and the way that they paced everything seemed to be really well chosen. And I feel like there were very well selected moments in the fight scenes that popped out, but they were all moments like him getting stabbed through the head with the spike, or the guy using the poison dart sleeve. It wasn't any of the action moments themselves, if that makes sense. It was more here's something cool and interesting that happens during the fight, or here, right. You know. But I thought that it was effective. I thought that all the fighting seemed to be shaped in service to the film.
Yes, there wasn't anything gratuitous about fighting. Sometimes I think some of these movies just have way too much fighting and not enough story where we get to know the characters. But I think this was equally balanced.
Yeah, I would agree. And this was a movie where I don't remember what the ratio of fighting to talking is. But a lot of times when you watch the movies, if it starts to slow down, you're like, okay, I really could use a fight scene about now. Do you know what I mean? And I didn't have that feeling. I was happy to follow the movie wherever it went, and I never had the opposite feeling, like you were saying, like, oh, this fight scene's kind of dragging. Could we please get back to the story? So I think you're right. It's a balanced movie. It doesn't ever leave you feeling like, okay, there's just too much action going on, or there's not enough action going on, or not enough story. It was very well made, very well structured.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It gives you everything that you want in the movie. Well, it did for me anyway, because I always like to have some kind of emotional reaction. I got that. I had great fight scenes. I got that. I had great characters that were well defined. I don't always need a hero in a movie. And you don't always need a villain. I don't think anybody in this movie is a villain, to the point, you know, in some movies that you just have people that are just really maniacal and totally off the wall. But this was really a circumstantial movie where everyone was pretty much doing things because of the circumstances that they were in, except for the Empress Dowager and her official who stole the money. They're just, you know, and I wouldn't even call them villains per se, but it just, for me it was well balanced. Like you said, it had the atmosphere. The music was great, because the music that plays at the end when the girl's standing out in the rain, if that hadn't have been playing, I probably wouldn't have cried as hard. So it was just the lighting was great, the costuming was great. I like the scene where the I think it's the fishing house again, but the guys are hidden on the side of the hill with trees on their backs. You remember that part?
Oh yeah.
That was very ingenious to have your whole posse waiting like that.
That was a surprise. That was a big surprise when that happened.
That was a big surprise. I was not expecting that. And in films that are set back in this time, you don't get a lot of the camouflaging of people laying in wait. Yeah. They're usually hiding in a tree or hiding behind something, but they're actually not camouflaged or dressed as something else, which I thought was really cool.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I really want to check out some of the director's other films. The ones that you mentioned, there are reasons why I haven't seen those.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a moment. I do just want to say the tactical stuff in this movie is great. I love the way that happens, and then later it's revealed that villain has that armor underneath his clothing, and they do the thing with the circle of fire, and then when they get to the beach, the killer constable realizes he can lure the guy into the water and get an advantage over him because he's got that heavy armor on. And so and there's stuff like that throughout the movie. Even the thing that leads up to the fishing house scene is all about how the guy tricks the other bandit into going there in order to set him up to get done with the killer constable. But before that, even, he kind of lays out what sounds like a really good plan of uniting with the different bandit guys. So there's all this tactical, strategic stuff going on. I was thinking about that because I was thinking, man, it would really be great if we could get Dion to watch more of this guy's films. But so many of his movies are the kinds of movies you don't like. That's the like Hex definitely I think would be tough for you, right? Like I think and the other movie that's a really great film, even though if I described the plot to you, it wouldn't sound like it, is Corpse Mania. But you could probably tell from the title alone that it's another type of film.
Not one of my types.
Yeah. And then, the Bamboo House of Dolls, I don't think so. That's just pure 70s exploitation. And it's really violent. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to find another Kuei Chih-Hung film that Dion can watch, because his movies really are.
He's a really good director. This is for me, it was a good way to introduce, because I would have never known he directed the other ones if I didn't do research.
He's a really good director who just happens to make 70s exploitation movies. Do you know what I mean? Like that's you kind of have to take the exploitation and the gruesome elements of the movies with most. This is one of his more palatable films. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I don't know. Killer Snakes might be pretty tough for you too. I don't know. We need to develop a way of testing how far you can go into these movies without committing to them. Do you know what I mean? So that because I feel like. Because there have been films in the past where I'm like, oh, Dion would not like this, and you ended up really liking the movie, and so I don't want to say no, you shouldn't watch these films because I think you won't like them, and I think they'll spook you if you might end up liking them. Yeah, I don't know. We'll try to figure it out. But anyways, I think we've discussed just about everything, and we're coming up on the 45-minute mark. So what is your rating and recommendation for this movie?
My rating is a solid 4. I really enjoy this movie. I think I've seen it 5 times, and it just gets me to thinking every time. There's nothing I can say that's bad about this movie. It's a really fantastic movie, and if you're a Chen Kwon-tai fan, I think it's good to see him in different lights. He's usually a hero, but not in this one.
Yeah, and his acting in this I thought was really good. I thought he did an
excellent actor.
Yeah, I thought that he did a lot of cool things with just visually with his eyes and stuff. Like the scene when after the speech about his humanity being like a sword, you kind of see that speech reflected in his eyes after he does the mercy killing. Do you know what I mean? And so, so I would give it a solid 4 as well. I would say solid 4. I'm a little bit tempted to give it a personal 5, but I feel like I know if I gave it a 5 and people saw it, it wouldn't measure up to a 5. Do you know what I mean? Like, people would be like, I don't know if this is a 5. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel
you're gonna have that problem anytime you do a movie.
You are,
my
but
personal 5s, no one thinks is a 5. So
yeah. No, I know that, but I feel like with this movie in particular, there's something about it that it doesn't quite hit the 5 mark for most people, I think. So I'm gonna go with a 4. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's a 5. You know what? Screw that. I'll give it a 5. I'm gonna give it a 5.
Go for it, Brendan.
Yeah, I'll give it a 5. And no more fence sitting on this 5 here. And the reason why is because of the depth the movie has to it, its ability to build atmosphere, and its ability to give us these great characters. I think the fact that you and I were having that back and forth discussion about is he the good guy? What's exactly going on with it? All of those things really make it not just a watchable movie, but a movie, if you watch it with people, you will have a conversation afterwards. It's that kind of film. And I also, just want to say to people, again, it's on Prime. You should definitely go check it out. If you have Prime, check it out there. I think it's available on Blu-ray now too. So, it's definitely the kind of film I would even recommend buying. I bought it, and I would recommend people purchase it if they are having trouble getting it. So we'll be back on next week. We're going to talk about what movie we'll do. And until then, we will talk to you later.